Okay, so we're jumping right into the class type conversion. We just finished doing string operations where we learned about how to concatenate strings and whether you can add or multiply them. So go check that out if you missed that. So let's go ahead and jump in this one, type conversion. In Python, it's impossible to complete certain operations due to the types involved. For instance, you can't add two strings containing the numbers 2 and 3 together to produce the integer 5, as the operation will be performed on strings, making the result 23. The solution to this is type conversion. In that example, you would use the int function. 2, so these are strings, 2 plus 3, the output is 23. And here it's saying if you put int in front of each of those strings, so you see this and this line are the same, except that they just put int in front of each of those strings. And I'm guessing that's converting those strings into integers, and that's what's allowing us to do that math operation to output 5. In Python, the types we have used so far have been integers, floats, and strings. The functions used to convert to these are int, float, and str respectively. Okay, let's play around with this a little bit. So we see that they put int here, but it said down below you could do it with floats as well. So if we were to do this, if we were to convert those into floats, what would that give us? Okay, yeah, so it just makes the float. It gives us the 5.0. And we're going to go ahead. I wanted to try one other thing. So instead of having strings up here to begin with, what if we were to have integers up here to begin with? And what if we were to convert those integers to strings? Would that then give the answer 23 instead of 5? Let's go ahead and try. Yeah, it does. So you can convert integers into strings as well. Okay, that's good to know. Kind of interesting. That could be useful. Okay, what is the output of this code? Int 3 plus 4. So 3 plus 4 is a string. Now, what's interesting though is since they're not separated, since there's not int in front of each of these strings, I'm wondering if first they add together to make 34 since they're strings, and then they're converted into an integer. So I think that's correct. So I think it's going to be integer 34 and not 7. So I think it's integer 34. Okay. Type conversion. Another example of type conversion is turning user input, which is a string, to numbers, integers, or floats to allow for the performance of calculations. Okay, so we talked about inputs yesterday, so I guess all inputs are considered strings by Python, so you have to specify if you want their input to be turned into a different type. So you'd put float and then input, and then that way it converts their input into that type. So I mean, let's play around with this a little bit. So print float input enter a number plus float input enter another number. So I mean, let's run this. Okay, so this is where and it looks like our program up here requires 2 inputs. So we're going to do 3 first, and then our second input's going to be 4. And it should print out 7.0, I believe. Yeah, it does. So it prints out each of these because that was the prompt in our input function. Enter a number, 7.0. So we're converting the inputs into floats, and then we're performing that mathematical operation. Because if we were to take away, let's say, one or both of these floats, and do the exact same input, I think we should get an error because we didn't convert this one into a float. Yeah, if you see here, unsupported operand types for plus, float, and string. So it's saying that we can't add a float and a string, since remember all input is considered strings automatically, so we can't add a float and a string together. That's why we have to specify that it's a float here. So we'll do that again, and it's getting an error. Print. Am I missing a bracket? Okay, yeah, there we go. So you have to convert both of those to floats. Okay, so let's continue. What is the output of this code? Float 210, so that's a string, remember that's a string, times int input, enter a number, and the input is that they're entering is 2. So we're converting this input into an integer. We're converting the number 2 into an integer, and we're multiplying it by the string 210. So 210 as a string times 2 is going to give us 210, 210. And then we're converting that into a float. So this should be the answer, the 210, 210.0. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Well, that was extremely useful and helpful. We were able to learn about type conversion, converting between strings, integers, and floats. And our next class is going to be talking about variables.